Shalom, holy initiates and holy adepts. This is part 2 to my series on HaSfiroth, which is meant to be an introductory series into HaSfiroth, which is essentially a full knowledge and wisdom of the Godhead. If you do not know what the Sfiroth are, or have never known what the Sfiroth are, then let me be the one to inconveniently tell you that you do not know God. You have never known God, because to not know HaSfiroth is to not know God. Okay? And there's much to say about this that I don't want to get into here right now. But this is part 2 to the series, and it's actually a re-upload because I found out as I was recently rewatching part 2 that there were some very blasphemous errors of the highest order that were contained in my original upload. So I had to delete the video, take it down, and now I'm basically redoing the video all over again. And so this is essentially a re-upload. Now this new version is a much more enhanced, much more superior version than the last version, and will most definitely not contain those very blasphemous errors of the highest order that the original version contained. Now, you may be wondering, what were these blasphemous errors? If you just, if you happen to have watched the video maybe some time ago, or even recently. I have prayed that everyone who has watched that video has forgotten what they have watched. And regarding your curiosity or your wondering, I will simply quote one of the most ancient, wisest grandmasters that we have on record, none other than Yeshua ben Sirach. In chapter 3, verses 22 to 24, he states, "Seek not the things that are too high for thee, and search not into the things above thy ability, but the things that Elohim hath commanded thee, think on them always, and in many of his works be not curious." So this is my reply. This is my answer to any of you who may have questions regarding the original inferior upload. So let us forget the past. Let us forget that upload. Let us focus on the present and on this superior new re-upload. Now, in part 1 of the series, part 1 was essentially all about introducing HaSfiroth and understanding HaSfiroth from the Holy Scriptures. Okay, you need, its purpose is so that you do not think that all of this very sacred, holy knowledge and wisdom that has been esoteric, since the beginning of the Aeon, is just something that we Jewish hierophants just pulled out of our ass. Absolutely not. Okay, it has its precedent. It has its precedent in the Torah and in the Holy Scriptures. The problem is that many Jews, many Christians don't know Hebrew and haven't fully mastered the ancient Holy Word and don't really know the Holy Word. Okay, just reading it on a literal level many years over and over again, it is not going to make you a master of the Holy Word. You need to be fully initiated into the holy mysteries and really into the holy mysteries. Okay, you need to be properly holy initiated. And unfortunately, over 99%, or so of people out there just have not been fully holy initiated into this very sacred holy word. Those are just the facts. Okay. So that was the purpose of part 1, was so that you understand the proofs of HaSfiroth from the Holy Scriptures, and to get you acquainted with the basics of HaSfiroth. Okay. So as a basic review of HaSfiroth, right, you need to understand that the Godhead, which is the Sfiroth, is a decad, and it's not restricted to a trinity. Okay, and Christians have a very shallow, very inferior understanding of God and the Godhead in general. Okay, so the reality is that the Godhead is a decad, and it's not restricted to a trinity as many Christians would, spuriously believe. Okay, but the Godhead has many levels to it. Okay, and this is very momentous to understand. In its most holistic form and manifestation, it is a decad. But the Godhead, you can think of it as a shapeshifter. It's essentially a shape-shifting entity and it could shapeshift into any manifestation of this decad. So there is a binary level, a tertiary level, quadrilateral level, etc. to the Sfiroth. So on its most basic level, the Sfiroth is essentially singular. We have to understand that we are in the mystical domain, in the domain of the holy mysteries, and we understand that the Sfiroth is simultaneously singular and plural. It is a paradox, a wholly supernal spiritual paradox of the highest order. So yes, the Sfiroth is a decad, meaning it is plural, but at the same time it is also singular through its unity. Okay? On another level, the Godhead is also binary via its male and female attributes, but there's also a trilateral aspect to the Sfiroth, and I have a video after you have completed this series that goes very deeply into the trilateral aspect of the Sfiroth. There's also a quadrilateral aspect, etc., all the way to the decadal level. So essentially, we can say that the Godhead is essentially n-fold up to n equals 10. Okay, and the Godhead can be in reference to any manifestation of the above. Sometimes the Sfiroth will manifest themselves to an individual as a trinity, sometimes as a duality, and sometimes as a singularity, and other times as a full decad. It just depends on the theophany that the individual is having. So sometimes we read in the Torah where, you know, the Sfiroth appear as a trinity, as they did to Abraham through the three angels, other times through a singularity, other times through a duality, depending on what divine names or shapes or forms are being represented. So it's very critical, very momentous to understand all of this. Now, we also need to understand that the Sfiroth have many titles. Every emanation has many titles and many names. So every emanation of the Sfiroth is not limited to just one name or one title. In fact, they have many names and they have many titles. And this is the bulk of the Kabbalists acquainting you with all of the code words for the Sfiroth. Every emanation can have many names. And so the foundation, I guess the most ancient root foundation of the most ancient original titles or names for the Sfiroth are found in Sefer Yeshayahu in chapter 11, verse 2. There we read, it states that the Spirit of Hashem is going to rest. This oracle is speaking on HaMashiach, and how there are 7 spirits are going to rest on HaMashiach. Now that's more of the literal interpretation. Now in the original Hebrew, the verse actually begins with the word nocha, which signifies she shall rest. So the spirit here is feminized. In reference to the spirit, it says she, the spirit, shall rest, is how the verse begins in the original Hebrew. And then follow the 7 spirits. Now we know that these spirits are all code words for emanations of the Sfiroth. So what we are given here essentially is the most ancient representation or delineation of the first 7 emanations of the Sfiroth. Okay, now exoterically 7 are delineated. Esoterically, if you are fluent in Hebrew and are dealing with the actual Hebrew of the verse, you will know that there are actually 9, because nocha as a Hebrew word counts as an emanation. It is feminine. It says she shall rest, and she is of course a reference to the last emanation, which is Malchuth, who rests upon all of the upper emanations. And nocha is the feminine Hebrew of Noach, and we know that Noach represents Zadik, which is the emanation that comes before Malchuth. Thus, for a total of 9 emanations. In Kolel, that makes 10 emanations. And so as a basic review then here, the first emanation is represented through the Tetragrammaton, which potentially we know contains all 10 emanations, because we know the first emanation contains all 10 emanations. In fact, every emanation contains all 10 emanations. We are dealing with essentially a very supernal hologram in essence. The second emanation is Chokhmah, and the third emanation is Bina, etc. Okay, so thus giving us a total of 9 emanations, which is 10 emanations in Kolal. Now, again, once you have finished this series, I have other videos that go a little bit more in depth in explaining the essence of some of these emanations. So because this is a very introductory video, I don't want to get too deep into explaining the essence of all of these 10 emanations. In fact, that's what studying Sefer HaZohar is all about, which I hope many of you listening are actively studying and penetrating and attempting to master Sefer HaZohar. Now, we are given another very ancient delineation in 1 Chronicles in chapter 29, verse 11, where there it's a different enumeration, where we are given to thee, Hashem, is Gedulah and Geburah and Tifereth and Netzach and Hod, for all the heavens and the earth is thy dominion. So here we are given actually the last 7 emanations, because what links this verse with the other verse is they both share the emanation Geburah. And so if we use this as an inner key to link these two verses, then the correct understanding, the correct divine reconciliation is that Yeshayahu must be enumerating the first 7 emanations, and this verse is enumerating the last or lower 7 emanations. Of course, here the heavens and the earth are very well-known code words for the 9th and 10th emanations if you are acquainted with our ancient sacred literature, specifically Sefer HaZohar. Any standard holy initiate and holy adept will know without a shadow of a doubt that the heavens is a reference to the 9th emanation, and the earth is a reference to the 10th emanation. Okay, so very, very important to understand. Now those are what was just revealed were the very ancient original titles and names of the emanations as were known to the very ancient Kabbalists living in the generations of the ancient Jewish prophets like Yeshayahu, Yechezkel, etc. In the more modern systems of the Jewish Kabbalah, there was sort of a rearrangement that was done, and so what I have here is a list of the Sephirotic names that are, I would say, a little bit more modern. That's not to say that they're wrong, but we need to understand that there are many titles and many names for each Sphira, and there are a number of many possible systems in the Kabbalah, and each system uses its own unique variety of names, and there's no right or wrong really variety. Essentially you have numerous amounts of potential possibilities and combinations, given that every Sphira has many names or many titles, right? As an example, the 10th emanation has many titles. We know her as Malketa, Shechina, Malchuth, Ruach HaKedusha, etc. There's many titles, many names for the 10th emanation, and likewise for every emanation. But the more modern system, as most modern Jewish Kabbalists know it, is the delineation or enumeration given here in this slide, where the first emanation is Kether, then it comes Chokhmah, Bina, etc., all the way down to the 10th emanation, Shechina. Now, just to elaborate a bit on some of these emanations, just to give you some very basic understanding, regarding the emanation of Kether, which is the first emanation, we need to understand that before the 10 emanations is the first cause, or cause of all causes, which is Ein Sof, or the infinite one. And we know as holy initiates and holy adepts that by definition we can't really speak on Ein Sof. We can't really say anything about him. He's beyond our comprehension in all regards. And we have to understand, with that understanding, then, that the first emanation, Kether, is because he is the first emanation, is the most sublime emanation and the closest to Ein Sof. And so Kether, because he is the first emanation and so close to Ein Sof, it's almost as if there's this very mystical, paradoxical equation between Kether and Ein Sof, which is why in many of our ancient Kabbalistic texts, there seems to be this very blatant, direct equation between Kether and Ein Sof. And so the very ancient, very, very spiritual, very mystical and paradoxical understanding is that Kether is Ein Sof, but he is also not Ein Sof. And there are many individuals who are not ready to be initiated, who are improperly initiated. And what happens is that over time there was a confusion that took place, and there were many Kabbalists, many inferior second, third degree Kabbalists incorrectly, spuriously and fallaciously came to believe that Ein Sof was the emanation Kether, because again, they were not spiritually ready. They were not properly sanctified to receive and understand this very ancient holy wisdom and knowledge. Okay, and so it's very, very important. Many of you are very fortunate that you have a grandmaster Kabbalist like myself that can reveal all of this to you. So the correct understanding is that yes, Kether is Ein Sof, and he is also not Ein Sof. It's a very sublime, very profound, mystical paradox of the highest order. Okay. This is why the Grandmaster Kabbalist Moshe Cordovero devoted a whole chapter in his magnus opus Pardes Rumunim explaining that Kether is not Ein Sof from a very technical, classical perspective. Then we have Chokhmah, the second emanation, which represents the Holy Father within the Godhead. We have to make a very momentous distinction when we are speaking of the divine archetypal family as the supernal archetypal divine family as it exists and as it is known within the Sfiroth, as opposed to its knowledge outside of the Sfiroth, which is very much different. So Chokhmah represents the Holy Father, and so we have this very esoteric understanding that we refer to Kether as the esoteric beginning. He is the unrevealed beginning, and Chokhmah is the revealed or exoteric beginning. And so there's this very momentous distinction between the first and second emanations. And there's many holy mysteries that branch out from this holy mystery itself and go much deeper, that again is far beyond the canon scope of this video. So really, from our vantage point, from our perspective as grandmasters, or if you're not a grandmaster, as holy initiates and adepts, is that the real true beginning from which we know and deal with is really Chokhmah. We don't really deal or have any dealings with Kether. For us, if there is going to be any dealings or communications or whatever you want to call it, it must all really begin in Chokhmah, which is the Holy Father. Then comes Binah, which is the Holy Mother. And the secret of Binah is that when it is permuted, it becomes Ben Yah, which is the son of Yah, meaning because she is the holy archetypal divine matrix that contains the holy divine son. The next 6 emanations that follow are the entire Holy Son. And Tiferet really represents the nexus of the Holy Divine Son, being the 6th emanation. And these six sons, which are in all reality mystically one divine son, represent the middle pillar, which is represented to the Hebrew letter Waw, which, guess what, happens to have a gematria of 6. And when the letter Waw is fully spelled out, which is Waw Aleph Waw, it has a gematria of 13, which happens to be equivalent to the gematria of Echad, which is 1. And so, mystically through gematria, it is making known to us that while we have 6 emanations, though there are 6 emanations, 6 sons, in reality, very paradoxically, very, very mystically, of the highest, we are dealing with mysticism at the highest order here, which is abound with antinomies and paradoxes from our vantage point. Really, we have one holy divine son, who is Waw, which has a gematria of 6. Now, you're going to have to process this on your own, because what is being revealed here cannot be properly expressed in words. And then we have the last emanation, Malchut, which is the daughter. Now, in that much higher Kabbalah, as you get very deep into the Lurianic Kabbalah, we also need to understand that there is a secret hidden emanation known as Da'ath, which is Hebrew for knowledge, which stands between Chokhmah and Bina. And very briefly, the reason for the existence of this very secret hidden emanation is to complete the count of 10 from the exoteric aspect of HaSfiroth, since we don't deal with Kether. And that's all I'm really going to say on this very hidden secret emanation. Everything else is unfortunately well beyond the canon scope of this video. So this concludes this very brief introductory video on HaSfiroth. I hope that many of you will continue watching this series until its end, and will also watch other videos that go much deeper into holy mysteries in regards to HaSfiroth on my channel. Shalom, Ramein.